Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
Hey Jackie, I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah.
Last webinar, Marche had made a statement, something like, well, actually Jackie adapted a little bit because it was a little redundant, but it's let's make a computer personal again. And it really, I loved it, right? Because, and it really started making me think about AutoHotkey. And I think it really puts the finger on why I personally love AutoHotkey so much, right? It's because you can adjust the computer to do really, to your becking, exactly what you want.
Yeah, and I do think that that's something, at least in the webinar last time where we had the touchscreen keyboard, which worked great. It was a very simple but amazingly smart way of utilizing AutoHotkey in a new and a different way. It was fairly cheap, and you could do whatever your height desires, kind of with that. But yeah, AutoHotkey lets you control Windows in just that little bit more personal way that most expect. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, between changing your hotkey, or even remapping keys on your keyboard, right? Or changing the accelerator key in a program. I was also thinking about it, the whole ability to have a context sensitive, hotkey. So you use the same hotkey for doing different things in, different programs. It's just, again, you're adjusting the computer to be smarter, right? And work the way you want it to.
Yeah, and again, sure, hotkeys and hotstrings and things that act on your input, but again, you can also do stuff that uses very simple loops or timers or wait commands that as soon as a specific windows pop up, something happens. It could be an email notification. It could be that irritating save dialogue in whatever program you usually do, or all those, and you can program something fairly simple to handle it for you.
Yeah, actually, to your point, let's say you had a button you didn't want people to press, right? You can disable it. You can even hide it entirely sometimes, right, where they don't even see it. I mean,
Yeah,
and this is not a program you wrote, right? This is in another program that you're just using. And the fact that you can actually do that blows my mind. When I first learned that, Jackie, like I I was so over the moon of like, that's crazy. How in the world can I actually affect that program like that? It blew my mind. It was just amazing.
yeah. I at one point had an issue. It's a few years ago where um, the program that we were working in had these sub windows. So it would load all kinds of different windows for you and stack them on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you wanted to shut down the topmost one, they weren't real windows. It was in the interface, but it had these small um, closing exits just below the actual exit, um, which meant that more often than not, I would actually click on the
Yeah,
program's true exit button and it
right.
would close everything down and I needed to start over. And I was like, that's amazingly irritating. And the first thing I did was I just made a transparent, um, always on top GUI to be in that corner.
Mm.
So when I moved the mouse there, I couldn't activate the button. And afterwards, I figured out that you could actually remove the buttons from the window. But yeah, in the beginning, just having something that simple, something that covered that button so I could click it.
Yeah.
It worked so well, and it took 3 lines of code or something. It was so
I
simple.
remember when I was at TI, I was using a program called Business Objects for running queries. And the thing was, it would run, and it would take sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes to return back the query, but there was no alert, right? So of course I couldn't just sit here and look at my screen, right? So I would get busy with other stuff, and then I would forget about it, and and so I looked at it, and it took me a little while, but then I realized you could see the status programmatically. You could access the status bar and just check for it. And when it was done, I actually had it flash and make a sound and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome, because now I don't have to keep kind of going back and checking on it. And once it's done, I can know right away and take action, But it was to your point, right? It was a very simple coding thing. But really changed how I worked and get stuff done. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, and some of the things we've seen with quick access pop-up, Linda list,
Right.
all these different types of helping programs, either you have it on your right bar or you have it on a hotkey, or whenever you move your mouse to a specific location on screen, or all those things that really makes Windows or your computer work in the way that you like best. It is truly amazing what you can do with these different types of tools.
Yeah. And to your point on that one, initially we were discussing things that we can kind of write code do with, but there's no reason why you can't create your own programs that do amazing things as well, whether you're interacting with another program or just making shortcuts to things you use frequently, or reconfiguring how your computer is working entirely, because it ties in so closely with the Windows API, and it's crazy what you can do with it on your computer, right? And
yeah, I remember I think it was Scan who made who has some great code samples lying around, where it would act as soon as you put in a specific USB device, and something would happen. Or some people who have a hotkey to switch whatever audio device they have, or switching the functionality of a specific key, or currently on the keyboard I have a small piece of AutoHotkey code running that switches some Danish letters, because on my keyboard the key has 3 different letter icon or letters on it, and apparently the driver for this one has shifted them from where I'm used to them being. So I kept typing the wrong letter.
Sure.
And then I would look at the keys, and I'm like, it is that one, the wrong one again. And
right.
So yeah. So it's very simple, but so nice to just be able to do that. And I had a colleague who apparently on one of his computer, the FN key and the control key were shifted for some reason. He couldn't explain why, and there weren't anything running on the computer that apparently would do it. So we made a small AutoHotkey script that just had that simple, and we compiled it and placed it in his startup folder. He doesn't have AutoHotkey. He has no idea of how it works, anything like that. But he, in maybe 3 to 4 minutes, had a program he could place in his start folder. So he doesn't need to run it or anything. And it's a very simple place to put it. It starts every time Windows starts. Yeah. And now the keys works as he expected. Right. And yeah.
Yeah, I have Word open in the background here, and I remembered I forget what I was doing, but I always, every time I would open something with I think what I was trying to do was to disable the spell check and grammar check, and for whatever reason I had hundreds of documents that I was doing it on, and so to get to those buttons, it was like 8 clicks. It was ridiculous, and so I did a little Googling, and with Calm, I was able to disable it. I could hit a button and it would, that's what it was. You know how like it'll underline on the screen, it'll show you the not a properly spelled word or a grammar.
Yeah.
There was no easy way, because I want to be able to turn it on and off, and so I could hit a button and it would actually just strip, turn that off without doing all the things. And yeah, it took me a little bit of time to Google it and find the solution and then adapt it. But the VBA is so close to AutoHotkey, it was really simple. But yeah, that was
Yeah, but again, you got something that worked exactly to your need, right?
right.
The and I saw, I can't remember where it was, maybe it was on Facebook or whatever it was. Someone was asking something fairly simple. Um, uh, how I don't know exactly what it was trying to detect something, and people were telling him about all these different programs he could download that would do it. And because it was something fairly simple, the 5 on his keyboard or whatever it wasn't working. So he wasn't able to type the number 5. And yeah, it's great you can download a program or you can use the on-screen keyboard or whatever, but you could also just make Control 4 type 5, right? It's that simple. Sure enough, most people would probably invest in a new keyboard if something that irritating happened, but you could solve it, and you don't need to go out and get something very complex. And I love the idea of just being able to shift all those small things with a few lines of code and there's no trust issue, might be a way of putting it, because every time you go to the internet, you find some kind of shady homepage that, you look at it and it's from 98. I was like, it says that the program will it run on this computer, right? It's like, yeah, AutoHotkey probably runs on your system and you can make the code yourself. There's no shareware or malware or adware or anything.
Well,
It's
and
just,
even if you have to, if you're getting a program, you can read it and often actually follow it, right? Even if you're not a programmer, it's not often there. Some of the stuff is so simple. You're like, this is not going to do anything nefarious, right? It's
no,
straightforward.
and it's because almost all of the things you can find are open source with AutoHotkey, and it's plain text, right? It might be AutoHotkey code and stuff like that, but because it's out there on the forum, it's very rare you would find something where people haven't asked for the source. So it's kind of community vetted that it ain't malicious, right? I know from one of the programs I was using a few years ago, I had an old version. I was like, maybe I should go and update it. And I was like, I went to a forum about it, and people were like, absolutely don't update, because in version 8.3, they apparently partnered with some shady things, and the installer put in all kinds of stuff you couldn't remove, right? It's like nobody really wants that. And here, fair enough, if you don't trust AutoHotkey, that's an issue. But if you have that installed, copy and pasting text that you can read and running a simple file, that's probably as straightforward as it gets, right? It's
And for those that didn't watch the last webinar, I think both of us say go check it out, right? But the first hour was really interesting. It was a program he had built with hot strings, and then the second hour he started off showing this customized secondary keyboard, physical keyboard, where he had remapped every key to do a hotkey. But then he's like, but then I switched over to a virtual, where he had like a phone almost, you know, a touch screen, and it was layered so he could change, you know, it's kind of like the ribbon. It would react differently depending on like what program was on. It would show different buttons to press. And like, again, how much more personalized can you get, right? It's, which incidentally, you know, I initially owned IHateTheRibbon.com when Microsoft first switched to the ribbon, because it drove me nuts, mainly because before you could customize your buttons, and when they first created the ribbon, you couldn't change the ribbon at all, and you couldn't add buttons. They just did a terrible job implementing it, and I just hated it. Now you can actually customize the ribbon and change it. They've thankfully, you know, fixed that. But I know a lot of people, especially if you were making your own buttons, which I do, you know, even inside Word or Excel or whatever, right? I would borrow theirs or make some other stuff. But
yeah, and totally the reason I would recommend watching that webinar, at least if you're interested in custom keyboard or custom buttons, is because in essence what he did, very smart. He was making some programs that would be nice to have, I'm sure, but it was a fairly low priced item you could buy, and with just a small AutoHotkey ability, if you can make a GUI like from I know you had that course on GUIs in AutoHotkey, making some very simple GUIs, and you could make that work for you. There's no need for the advanced GUIs with layers and buttons that load other buttons and stuff like that. That's really great. But in essence, you could make one of the known gray GUIs with 16 plain AutoHotkey buttons that had whatever text you needed on them, that all did their own thing, and then you would have a custom keyboard.
Yeah. Remember the guy that near the end of it, he shared he had that keyboard that was separate and in the middle. I forget what they're called, but he had bought one of those the expensive, you know, external keyboards that have the buttons, and it was still really cool what he did. But it was just like, wow, he spent a lot of money on the keyboard, the both keyboards actually. Still, it was really cool how personalized it was.
It was really personalized, but yeah, he also wanted the keyboards to be slanted to some degree, and a specific angle because of his wide shoulders, so he had a very specific way he wanted to sit there. But yeah, instead of having bought that fairly expensive pre-made keyboard, he could just as easily have bought that much lower priced touch device, and had built his own custom look for it. Yeah, it's kind of like he sounded like he might be one of those that did that. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, it was a great example of, you know, adapting a computer. Because here's the thing, right? The vast majority of us, we spend a lot of time on the computer, and why not make it more efficient, right? Spend a little bit of time, and suddenly your productivity goes up a lot because you're just more efficient.
Yeah, and here I can't really emphasize how simple it was. Get a touch screen, connect it as a screen to your PC, and put an AutoHotkey GUI on it, and there you go. You have a 100% customizable keyboard for yourself. That's nice.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah. Well, that was actually, remember, someone on the webinar said they actually took apart that expensive keyboard, the external, like, you know, and underneath it actually was one of those touch screen keyboards, you know, they had mounted with buttons, and so you'd push the buttons instead of having the touch screen. That was a fascinating revelation to me. Wow, but I do get the physical having of buttons, right? Is it helps, but
yeah, I said that to myself. Because again, if you want to be like, I don't know what you call it, blind typing.
Yeah.
You might need to be able to know exactly where your fingers are, where on a touch screen, that's a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
But yeah, as something extra with where you want to have specific functionality at your fingertips, where you could at a glance just, oh yeah, push button 64 on that screen and the action would happen. That's pretty useful.
Yep. Awesome.
Or on screen, right? Who knows?
Great.
But yeah.
Well, thanks, man. That was fun and very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.